Tonight, we're going to look at the world from a conservative side, but we're going to start with the world from the eyes of a very special person and how we saw Bob Burns. Bobby was with us for a long time, and he added a lot of color and excitement to our show and to many people's lives. Why don't we start with introductions, and then Ed, why don't you take us through Bob?
Hi, I'm Ed Bertarelli, member of the Republican Town Committee and former Republican State Party official, and hold a couple of offices in the town of Milford currently.
Hi, I'm Mike Soares. I'm a member of the Republican Town Committee as well, and a member of the Milford Finance Committee here.
Bobby's missed.
Yes. I've known him my whole life. He's probably about 4 years younger than I, but in the process of growing up and growing older and whatever, you know, our paths crossed. I knew him because he was one of the people who at a very young age was stricken with polio, and touch and go from years. When Bob had it, as I say, I was slightly older, polio was an epidemic and feared. People in Milford were, in other Upton and all the towns around us were coming down with it in all different stages and forms and severity, and there hadn't been a cure. In my lifetime, I think I was in the 3rd grade, Jonas Salk and Dr. Sabin developed a cure for it, a preventative vaccine. Certainly the people who were stricken with it, some recovered, some passed, and some did incredible things with their lives, and I think we could say Bob Burns did that. Bob would, if you ever said to Bob that he was a victim or you'd get a crutch or a hand and go, I'm no one's victim. I knew what I had. I fought all my life for the things I have, and his wife, his children, his property, his job that he held with the state of Massachusetts for decades. So he was, and also, which I found out at his funeral, a deeply religious person. And he had a very personal relationship with Jesus Christ and the scriptures and the Bible and his minister and the members of his congregation. That was, I think, very important for him.
Bob was his own man. Nobody could ever accuse him of not saying what he thought and saying it clearly. I miss him.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the show will never be the same without him saying, "Wait a minute."
Wait a minute. Just wait a minute, Al.
Yeah.
Well, I remember he came on and we were talking once, a show when you were talking, as you're a very generous person, we're talking about some people needing extra help and needing whatever, and I remember over here I said, "Wait a minute, Al," and the voice was, and he went through a little rendition of what he thought of life and what he thought of when you empower people, and it's the old thing, teach someone to fish rather than,
he never seemed to think he needed any special help,
No.
and somehow every time you ran into him, you believed him because he proved it.
Yep. Sense of humor, wicked sense of humor, and just a way of just relating with people and loved people. That's the way I look at him. And he served the town of Hopedale for many years in many different capacities, selectman. He was very active in the Hopedale Republican Town Committee and the Massachusetts Republican Party. He was certainly very conservative, but in our party there's again, it's a wide range of people from sort of moderate liberals to conservatives. And I think one of Bob's greatest things was he ambushed Donald Trump up in New Hampshire, and they were at a candidate forum before it all started, and Bob is in his motorized wheelchair and he's looking down. Well, here's where the debate is, but here's the holding area where they have to walk under this awning to come up. So he positions himself shamelessly and he says, Mr. Trump, and Trump had some bodyguards at the time, and they turn around and they see this, guy in a wheelchair, and they're just smiling, and Trump went right over, and that's the picture Bob had on his Facebook page, always with him with President Trump. So.
Someday, I look forward to having our debates again.
Yes.
Hopefully as we take that bus ride north. I don't want to be given suntan lotion and a towel when I get on the bus, but I'm sure that he went north and he's going to be waiting.
His quality to his minister, the quality of his faith, and the faith of all the people around him was utterly amazing. Yeah. He's blessed to have that. Yeah.
Bobby, you're well thought of and very much missed.
Yes.
Now as we roll, because I can just hear him saying, wait a minute, now you've talked enough, get on the topic.
Yeah.
Where to start? A little thing about a wall?
Well, I mean,
What is this urination contest all about?
Well, we're on what, day 18 of the government shutdown. They said today it was the second longest shutdown we've ever had, and it's basically about Trump's wall. He wants funding for the wall, 5.7 billion, which when you compare that to the overall general budget, it's pocket change compared to the entire budget. But they have decided, Democrats have decided that they're not going to fund his wall, and the Trump is standing his ground and saying he's not going to pass any sort of
Legislation to open government.
yeah, any sort of bridge, to resolution
You know what I don't
to
understand? A lot of the people who are against the wall at 5 billion voted for the something. The hindrance, the fence at 1.6 billion when it was under the previous president.
well, it's,
So-
anything with Trump's name on it is anathema to the Democrats, and I'm not forgiving the Democrats for their intransigence, but their base has Trump derangement syndrome, and for them to say anything that's favorable to Trump is almost a death sentence in a primary. So the Democrats, even the ones who might want to make a deal, are up against it as far as with their base. The also thing is that it's technically 25% of the government is closed, 75% is open. And honestly, I have to say, as a conservative person, I don't miss it. This is, the Washington elites are bloviating about this and that and the other thing, but the fact is, for the average person, the average member of society, where we've had record employment, the economy's humming along, stock market bump here and there, but the general welfare of people and the prosperity of people we haven't seen this in a decade.
For the average worker, this is a cash flow issue.
well, that's the problem. You have essential employees, right, that are still expected to work even though they won't be collecting a paycheck. A great example is the TSA agents at airports. Even though the government is technically shut down, they're considered an essential employee due to national security, and they're expected to go to work.
They should pay them.
They should get paid.
Yes.
In my opinion, yeah, they're working, they should get paid, but due to our laws and whatnot,
Yep.
they're not allowed to get paid until we have a resolution to this.
Yeah. But again, it's one of the things that the Democrats always pull is that Republican budgets, children will starve in the streets and whatever. We know that's been debunked many years, but part of this too is, and as we're taping tonight, President Trump's going to be addressing the nation on the wall. Whether you want to call it a wall or a system of defenses or screenings or whatever, the people in the Southwest have been living with this for decades.
But isn't there already fences
Well, but I
and
mean, we're
barriers?
far away from the Southwest, and when you hear about how Mexico's descending more and more into, chaos and violence because of the drug cartels, I'll just deviate for a minute. When that quote, cortege or whatever you want to call them, of people from Honduras came up, the country of Mexico offered them residency in Mexico.
Right.
And they said no. Well, if I were Mexico, I would have said, well then, go all the way back, because if Mexico isn't good enough for you, certainly the United States, and go back to Honduras.
And there's a fundamental question saying,
Yeah.
if you're asking for asylum
Yeah,
Right.
because your life is in danger. Now, when you went through two countries to get to the Mexican-Texas border or
Yes.
California border, and Mexico, maybe not perfect, but there's a heck of a lot of Mexicans who live in Mexico who
They-
aren't under siege.
they
or-
offered them asylum.
That's my
Right.
point, saying, wait a minute, if you argue that in Honduras or Guatemala or wherever, it's so bad that my family's at risk,
It's
but I'm in Mexico.
And that's why about 95% of those cases fail, those candidates fail to get asylum, because they don't meet the
Yeah.
specifications
They're
of
saying what
being
they
in
think they have
specific
to say.
fear.
Well, yeah.
So, really, it's clear to me, and it's clear to most Americans, I believe, that they're coming here to work, not because they're afraid or in danger of their life for the most part. Because if that were the case, when Mexico offered them asylum, they would have taken it if they were truly afraid to go back home. So, it begs the question: what other reason is there for them to continue on another 2,000-3,000 miles to the U.S. border, if not because they simply want to work here legally?
Yeah.
But now there seems, at least what I'm seeing is there's a change. Before, I would come to the border, put a foot in, say I claim asylum, and we would say, okay, well, maybe in 3 months we'll talk to you, go.
Yeah.
Go into Texas, go into California, you're on your own, just come back.
And you vanish, basically.
And now all of a sudden we're saying, well, wait a minute. We know you're going to vanish. We know you're not going to come back. At least a lot of you, because the odds are, somebody's going to say, why was it dangerous in Mexico?
Right.
You were living in Mexico.
Well,
You were there. You could have stayed there. So why do we let you in the U.S.? So now they're telling them, okay, you're not our problem. We're going to close the border.
yes.
And you stay in Mexico.
And you can see what's happened in Mexico. Mexican citizens are going, well, wait a minute. What are we supposed to support these people or whatever? We have little enough on our own. So it's one of those things. There's another interesting one. We always hear this from our Democrat friends when we talk about voting and ID and whatever. There's the mantra that they say that voter ID suppresses turnout and that it's unfair to voters. Well, just a news flash. For the last 15, I believe almost 20 years, Mexico, a voter ID is compulsory to vote in Mexico. And they have a state-of-the-art technology, which they've used from different companies overseas to prepare an ID that's there. So if it works in Mexico in elections,
Yeah, but
no, but my point is, we can't use it in a country that's much more advanced.
here's where I have a fundamental problem.
Well,
This morning I went to the Brigham for my post-surgery checkout, and for me to register, they wanted a government ID.
well, that's very intrusive. I'm shocked by that.
I mean, I'm sitting there saying, well, wait a minute. Just to get my x-rays, I need to give them my license or an
Yes,
ID.
yes.
I guess a passport would have been
Yeah.
the same. So how is it that if I want to go to the airport, last time I looked, I can't get on a plane?
Yep.
And they even told me that my Massachusetts ID isn't good enough come April.
2020.
Okay.
Yes.
But it's not going to be good enough. I got to get a
the
new
real
special
ID. The real ID.
ID. So somehow to do what I consider mundane things like get on an airplane, go into the hospital to get my x-rays. No, I got in the hospital without an ID, but I couldn't register for any tests without it. That seems okay. But to do something that I consider the greatest right I have
Privilege and right, yes.
is to vote, I can't.
Well, it's like the phony thing about the citizenship questionnaire on the census. Are you a U.S. citizen? Again, the same group, and usually they're paid spokesmen of, assault, civil defense,
Yeah,
and
help me
civil
understand.
rights.
Why would I care if they say, "Are you a citizen"?
Well, it's this tone that this would dissuade people from doing it. Well, I think we've talked on several shows about this. There are clearly a number of districts in the United States, U.S. House districts, of the 435 House members, a number of them where a significant percentage of the people living in them are not legal. But for district purposes, they're counted as a district. So we have the weird thing of you can't vote, you can't do this, you can't do that.
So I could have 20,000 residents
Yes.
and only 10,000 legal voters.
But your district is based on that 20,000 residents. Now
But-
write that as a congressional district. You take the district where that famous, the media star, what's her name from New York now? I can't pronounce her name. The new U.S. rep there, the dancing U.S. rep.
Oh, Cortez?
Cortez.
Oh,
She defeated a man in a congressional district in New York, Crowley. Well, the district had changed so radically. When you look at the total turnout in the primary, it was tiny compared to what it should have been in the district, because a lot of the people we're not able, we're not residing there legally. So it shows you that there are many districts.
But if you have a third, I mean, it's bad enough. I mean, we went through an election a few years ago where we had 12% turnout in Milford. Now, unofficially or, without any data, we believe we have 28,000 legal residents in Milford and about 32,000 residents.
Yes, okay.
So when you say 12%, if you're counting 30,000, or some of the districts down along the southern border where the percentage is much higher,
Yeah.
I mean, no wonder the percentage turnout is low.
And also, it also dictates the type of politician you have in there, because they have to make sure everything in their power that these laws stay the same. Because if the districts were altered to reflect U.S.
then
residents.
you run into what we just did, where you lose a congressman and you got to shuffle.
Exactly.
The argument from the opposition is that, there's no need for voter ID. There's no fraud proven. And, we live in a world where identity theft is everywhere. I mean, every time you punch in any password, you have to answer your 3 secret questions. You need the last 4 of your social security number. You need all these identifying questions answered. And somehow they think something like our elections aren't vulnerable if you don't.
So you're going to go to dip your thumb in the purple ink?
Well,
I mean, that may be a good thing, because then you'd know who voted.
well, the thing.
That could help, but did the
I'm
right
joking.
person? But did the right person vote? For instance, if you live in a district that is, we all know that there are districts that are competitive and districts that aren't. So your vote may not make as big an impact on your district. Maybe you go impersonate someone else in a district that is competitive and make a difference there.
See, the issue I've had all along is if presenting an ID is a problem for people because they can't afford to buy it or get it, then have Milford Town Hall open every other Saturday and have free.
But every state that's made ID mandatory has done that, but it hasn't affected the argument of the opponents. So in other words, they have done everything they can, but the very idea that you would request, the nerve that you would ask for an ID to these people, but it shows you how.
But wait a minute, Ed, well, how do they answer the question if these people who get offended want to fly anywhere? They're not allowed on a plane.
But Al, ask them the next time you have your show here, and talk to the liberal view or whatever it is, because that's the dominant view in Massachusetts. If you dared raise that issue, you'd be pilloried. If you're a politician, chances are you might be unelected, because they
better than being Hillaried.
Okay, yeah, well.
But I mean, all kidding aside,
Yeah, but I mean, again,
I don't understand the logic.
Well, but again, there isn't any logic attached. But when you have the media, the way they present the question, people are afraid to raise these issues because they don't want to be called, quote, racist. They don't want to be called all the other SS terms that what people use when there's a discussion going on.
Now, for a while, I've been less than pleased when Trump goes off book and he uses terms that are less than flattering. And he's gotten nailed for it, and I think rightfully so, right? And our media has gone all after him about him using words that are embarrassing to the country. How do you explain our wonderful new representative from Michigan? I mean, using the term MFer?
In front of her child.
Well, in front of my children.
Her child.
I'm watching, my children are grown, but I'm watching the nightly news. And what's the first thing a kid's going to say? What did she say?
And the worst part was that she was unapologetic about it.
Yeah.
I mean,
No, she doubled down.
she doubled down, exactly. So she basically said, she had every right to call him that, and that he was that, and that she wasn't sorry for it, and now is the time to impeach.
Now my question would be, the lady claims to be Muslim. Am I correct? I believe.
But it's immaterial.
No, wait. Yeah, it's very material. She says she's Muslim. Okay. Now imagine her in a Muslim country.
Well,
let me finish. Imagine her in a Muslim country, even a moderate one like Lebanon, Egypt. Well, let's see, anywhere. But now imagine her in Syria, or Iran or Iraq. A woman, Saudi Arabia, a woman using that kind of language about any male. First of all, it would be, the consequences. So I'm a little confused. So you treasure your freedom in the United States.
Ed, my problem
Well-
is, here's somebody who's a leader. Frankly, I don't care if she's, part of the culture of Islam,
Well, but the point is,
Catholicism.
it's key here because the views, the strictures of the religion which she professes to practice. That to me, she is not just a U.S. representative. She has clearly said, I'm one of the few Muslim women who are in the House of Representatives. She's used that as a banner along with the lady from Minnesota, and that's fine. But I'm just saying, let's follow the sequence along as to what would happen. But it's
I just
unbelievable
think
anyway.
It's
Yeah.
it's undignified.
Yeah.
It's
Can you imagine if the last administration, if a skinhead had used that kind of language, or
Well, the media would be outraged. Did you hear any outrage from the media? I haven't heard much.
That's what stumps me.
Well, why?
Wait a minute. If it had been somebody that I consider, and I get scared of the ultra right, I get scared of the ultra left, but if somebody had said that to our previous president,
Well,
the world would have ended.
The racist card would have been played. So yeah.
well, yeah. If had it been our president that said,
Or if they
anything-
had played it against candidate Clinton, it would have been the sexist card.
right.
And yet, somehow, you got Nancy Pelosi and them saying, well, she has a right.
Ignoring.
No,
whatever.
even ignoring is bad,
But again,
she has a right
But you think
to express her opinion.
Let's play it though this way. This does not play well. The Democrats took over the House. Okay, they have someone talking like this. One of their other things is a 70% tax. One of them wants to do a green tax, 70% of
Green New Deal, yeah.
on the highest income. So their things that they're going to run on are so far to the left that I think what I'm looking at is with a little smile. I think it's absurd someone would talk like that, but it doesn't do the Democrats any good to have someone like that as a spokesman. Period.
I just read some data, and far be it that some of these people let facts get in the way of their informed opinion, that the top 10% of the earners in this country pay 80% of the federal tax.
That's scary.
Sure.
You know?
So I sit there and say, they're not paying their fair share?
Well,
It's not enough. There should be 90%.
But, I had a problem because I had this argument before where I said, I'll admit it, I don't pay $20 million a year in income tax. There's this whole argument that there was a man who makes $200 million a year, and he's only paying $20 million a year
Well,
in income tax.
who
Do you
used
know
the
any-
term only?
Well,
One of them. Yeah,
of somebody who was of
Yeah.
liberal persuasion.
Yeah.
And I said, I got a problem. I don't know any of my friends paying $20 million a year. How do I say you're not paying enough?
But I have a question. Are we, and I guess it's rhetorical, and Michael's of an age that would see it probably a little better, but we have an age where people have forgotten what communism and socialism did to all the countries of the world where it was tried. Just take a look at Venezuela right now, okay? And then take a look at all these alleged educated elites in Washington who seem to be marching toward a socialism. America became a great country because it was not a socialist country. I mean, when the Soviet Union fell, when Eastern Europe fell, it was the failure of communism and socialism that destroyed it. Are we trying to go backwards now through Bernie and these other people who've got elected?
But
I question.
people forget the quotes from people like young Maggie when she said, socialism is wonderful until you run out of other people's money.
Yeah, well,
You
but
know,
don't
and
you hear? But
Thatcher
don't you hear?
hit-
Do you hear this from? And that's why when we segue to Baker, you hear it from particularly the liberal Massachusetts State Senate. You hear about all this redistribution and progressive taxes, and it's all an idea. Give them more money to waste, basically. You know.
But to go back to your example, I understand the frustration though when you see somebody who, as a percentage of their salary, is paying 10%. When someone like myself is median wage, paying 30% of my income. I can see the frustration, but the reason that is because our tax system is so complex. It is, you could fill an encyclopedia of our tax code.
Yep.
And so they hire very expensive lawyers and they find every loophole, every tax credit, every deduction, And I've always said, you know, let's just get rid of all of this and go to a flat
tax, wasn't that Stephen Forbes?
You know,
That was one of his great,
One of his big planks he was running on is do away with the IRS
Well-
and come up with a flat tax. So
But
you
that-
don't even have to file, just
But
like
the problem,
Social
the problem
Security.
with that is, though, that when you get rid of all, as the Republican tax cut showed, when you're trying to get rid of the deductions, like mortgage interest, the great one was the high tax states like New York and California, which I think are both bankrupting themselves. I mean, California's further along in the stream of craziness, but their taxes are so high they were demanding that still be a deduction on the
Right.
federal income tax because their taxes were
But
so
remember,
high.
Forbes came out with,
Yeah.
the formula was 17%.
okay.
So he said take 24% off the top, 7 for Social Security, 17 for taxes. You don't even have to file, we'll just take it.
And then be done.
And it'll be done. And then everybody said, but wait a minute, that means anybody making, and this was 20 years ago, more than 100 grand a year has a 30% reduction in taxes. Anybody making 50 grand a
Well,
year will see a
Yeah, but if you go
30%
into every
increase.
specific
Yeah, but
example
again,
like
that's
that, you're
the problem.
going to find winners and losers in any.
I think the problem was you can't have a flat tax because 90% of the people would have a huge jump in what they
Well,
have to pay.
But the thing is, the problem today, though, in public policy is, your argument just showed it is, every time someone proposes something, millions of people get paid advocates, whatever you want to call them, lobbyist advocates, to defeat things. So every time there's a bill that's brought forward that might negatively affect someone, they bring out everything. So there's no
But Ed,
consensus.
now I'm hearing these words that having a border is immoral.
Well,
Well, that
Again,
should
but what-
be thrown
but-
out right there.
yeah, but-
There's
yeah.
no morality with a wall. I'm sorry. They
tell
don't-
that to the Soviet Union. I'm a little confused
Yeah,
here.
but that was set up to
Those
keep people in.
No, I'm
People-
asking. No, I'm asking a question. I mean, do we really think America's not? There aren't enemy. We have enemies in the world.
People who believe that walls are immoral need to remove the doors from their houses.
Yeah, exactly.
To let everybody in.
Exactly.
Because that's what it is. It's a door. okay?
Ronald Reagan said, "A country without borders isn't a country." Okay, one of his quotes.
Well, I mean, think about
well,
Hugo Chavez had the largest petroleum reserves in the world. And for a very, in historical terms, short period of time,
He ruined it.
but he bought everybody around him off.
10-cent gas for 20 cents a gallon, whatever. He bought the poor off so the electric
But
would
he
go.
bought Cuba, every country.
He destroyed the petrochemical industry because he wouldn't invest in the things he needed to
and
modernize
now
it.
all of a sudden,
They're
the
starving.
socialist idea,
Well,
they can't even feed themselves.
but why aren't these people and why aren't the media in Washington showing what socialism is? Because as we've said on many shows, the bias of the media is so overwhelming. When Ronald Reagan was in, when both President Bushes were in, the disdain was sort of masked a little. But Trump went right after them. As I said, good, bad, or indifferent, who would have called Hillary a crook?
Yeah.
He did it. And it caught on with people. Finally, someone's telling it sort of like it is. Well, but he also said the same about the media because he's talked about CNN, he's talked about other things, and they return the favor. So it's no. I think I don't know whether that was it a joke today?
He's done so many good things, but couldn't he keep his mouth
Yeah, but
shut?
wait. But you just said, but he's done so many good things. I would argue the things that he's done affect the regular person, not the elites in Washington. Jobs, record low black unemployment, record low Hispanic unemployment. We sit here very privileged, okay, in our own way. But for a lot of people, and not like the talking heads in Washington, a job, the opportunity to have one job or two jobs is the way to send their family to the future, don't you think?
Think about how many years we lived with. It was Bush's fault. It was Bush's fault. And today's economy, the global economy, you cannot expect to do better than 2% growth.
No.
And then all of a sudden, this new guy gets in.
We're hitting 4%.
And I loved it because the previous administration got up and said, well, the only reason we're hitting 4% is I set it up.
Yes, but
You
again,
didn't build that?
Yes, but again, have you heard anything accept grudging asides from the talking press. And that's what I say about the thing is, I always thought, and I said this to Bob in one of the shows, I always thought the press assumed they ran America. The media ran America because they formed the way people looked at things. Remember, it's no accident the way questions and issues are formed in people's minds. Like the cages that the immigrants were
Right.
supposedly in, when those were in Obama's.
When they found out that it was 2-year-old pictures.
Yeah.
But it wasn't
Think
mentioned.
about it. Back in the 60s,
Yeah.
our good friend from that wonderful economic system, Nikita, came over.
Yeah.
And he looked at Kennedy and said, how do you run a country if you don't run the press?
Yeah, well. But
Yeah.
no one wants to run the press. But the point is that it's so
But
so
it showed you what
Yeah.
he thought
Yeah.
the impact
Yeah.
of the media could be.
Yeah.
He didn't think he could run a country without controlling the
Well,
media.
I don't think Russia's ever had a different view. I mean, that's, I think, instilled in them. It's more, what do you call it? But I think if we go to segue a bit to our state, I mean,
Yeah, how do you figure we have the most popular Republican?
doesn't mean that his party
in,
means nothing.
No, but I'm just saying, at the end of the day, Charlie Baker, Karen, they're Republicans
Yeah.
in a very blue state. And yet, forget the party lineage. Everything I read says he's the most popular governor in the country.
Well, because he puts aside the partisan politics and said, look, here's the problem.
We solve it.
Here are my ideas for the solution. Here are your ideas for the solution. Let's come together in a constructive manner. It's funny. It's a very different strategy from our president that likes to just attack and sort of get you to come to his way. Charlie Baker is a much more, all right, give and take sort of politician.
Charlie
where,
Baker's a manager.
Exactly, yeah.
You know, at the end of the day,
He's a
you
former
don't
CEO.
look at him as, the Uber CEO,
but-
dictator.
But
he's a
he
manager.
takes a particular problem. Someone can get up and talk about everything. The sky is blue, this is that, whatever, the border, whatever. But he saw one problem. The Department of Children and Families was an utter disaster. People were dying, kids were getting lost, whatever. He's working to solve it with more money and more what would you say, consequences for the employees or whatever. The same with Bridgewater State Hospital. He's gone in there and he's taken problems. He doesn't just have a general view of things. He's looking at specific problem areas, and transportation is another one, which is a very difficult one to try and solve with the age of the infrastructure of the public transportation in the state and the roads. But he's trying to solve bit by bit problems and direct his attention, because I think that's one of his talents as a manager, to try and solve these problems. So, probably I'd say the bulk of the voters in Massachusetts are basically the unenrolled, the independent voter. But they love him. A good number of Democrats love him and the Republicans like him, and that's a recipe. I mean, I'm sure he might even get calls to run again for a third term if he wanted to, and he probably would get elected. So, I mean, because he's a relief from whatever.
Well,
And there's few issues that you can really nail him on to say,
Yeah.
I was really upset with the position you took here, because
Yeah.
he doesn't take.
no, but he's taken some
extreme-
positions. Look at Planned Parenthood. When the funding got cut,
Yeah. Well,
now that was not a Republican position he took when he said he would make sure the doors stayed open.
I understand, but again, I guess what I look at our press at, the press is, the only time I ever saw them try to do that to a Democrat was a Globe reporter asked Marty Walsh who he voted for governor. And he refused to say, which means to basically said he voted for
Charlie, but
Yeah.
I can't use the words.
But you notice they've always tried everything under the skin about Trump and whatever. He said, I didn't vote for either one of them. Drop it, and that's it. And it goes away, So, yeah.
One of the things that the press is loving is the fact that the tariffs are starting to hurt some companies.
Mm-hmm.
That the whole,
Oh, the press that doesn't like Trump, yes, of course, yeah.
well,
Yeah. Yeah.
today's New York Times, or yesterday's, ran an article how some of the companies out in the square states are starting to get hurt by the tariffs.
Yeah, sure, of the soybeans, and even the farmers,
And the
soybeans
farmers.
and whatever, yeah.
And with any policy, again, they're going to be winners and losers.
Yeah.
The government is not there to ensure that everyone's a winner. It's there to ensure that the majority of the people what the policies are what's best for the majority of the people. And so if there are trade practices that China is engaging in that is unfair, then they need to be punished.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, that means there are some unintended consequences here, but the overall consequence is better for everyone, because now they're going to have to change those practices or deal with more tariffs.
But now let me ask you your opinion. Is anything going on in Washington today? I mean, you're saying they're supposed to be doing things to help the majority. The only thing I hear is about this goddamn shutdown and this
Yeah,
wall.
but again, you're listening to people who are part of the problem because they're in Washington. I mean, I regard the problem in Washington. I mean, what did someone say? Every day the legislature's not in session is a good day. Well, I sort of regard that about Congress some of the time, because the fact is, the Beltway around, Trump calls it the swamp. Well, maybe that's an overreaction, but the fact is, 25% of the government is shut. 25%. 75% is open. Fact. But according to the mass media, or whatever you want to call it, who are just setting this up.
Doesn't sound that way.
Well, it doesn't, because they're creating the, quote, the pressure on Trump. I think the other thing, you go back to the tariffs, is the Chinese, for many years, when a presidential administration goes out of office, the Chinese have been very successful in hiring former officials as lobbyists. I mean, they're in the big firms, and some of the biggest lobbying firms in Washington work for the Chinese government. Well, it was almost like an inside thing. So, I mean, it's no exaggeration. The Chinese have had our number for years. They know presidents come and go. Now they have their president for life, I guess, who they put in there, and he's going to have a certain range of policy. I mean, the one wrinkle on his horizon is, the crazy guy in North Korea, and how we all manage that. But I think especially in Europe, again, something that started reported, the West Germans signed a deal to bring a massive amount of liquefied natural gas from the United States over, which helped, because they were getting very subservient to Russia, because they were dependent on it. I mean, it wasn't that long ago that the Republicans voted. There was a ban on exporting oil. I don't know when it was put in, many decades ago.
That was before fracking.
It was long before fracking, but it was a ban on exporting American oil out of the United States.
So we didn't have enough to supply our own.
And now we're in a situation where
We're one of the biggest oil exporters.
Exactly.
If not the biggest.
And now with natural gas, especially going to Europe, it's perfect. And Trump put a little pressure over there, and I guess the ambassador to Germany, I forgot his name now, but it's quite a sleeper as far as a very successful negotiator and manager over there because Germany's the most important country, obviously, in that whole area. And what Germans do is whatever. So I think it's a message that we'll see what happens.
Well, you talk about Germany. Trump's put some pressure on NATO, saying, why are we paying 50% of the bill?
Right. Well, in the treaty, in the NATO treaty, it says that you should be putting 2% of your GDP towards defense. And it's there, and people haven't been living up to that contract obligation, and Trump has put them on notice to say, look, you have agreed to this. You want NATO protection, you have to bring your part to the table. It only works if everyone does their share.
But why doesn't he stand up and say, okay, boys and girls, cut back NATO?
Yeah.
If you're not going to pay, I mean, that's
the ultimate threat.
I got a kick out of Macron when he said, wait a minute, if we're going to increase our military
See
spending.
what happened to him, yeah.
What? If we're going to increase our military spending, we have to buy French military products, not American. And I sat there and I said,
is that a joke or?
Well, wait a minute. Why don't we listen to the man?
Yeah.
So anything that American dollar gets spent on should be American military.
Well, one of the key reasons they don't do anything is Putin. Because it doesn't take much to remember that he annexed the Crimea, which was very favorable, pro-Russian as far as inhabitants, but because of its massive gas deposits. You have Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania, which
but Ed, there's something. People didn't understand that the Crimea was not about an emotional tie to the Crimean people.
No, but the people were amenable to Russian.
strategic to the.
Yeah, but I
to the-
mean,
It wasn't like
Black Sea.
they were going to protest,
Right.
which wouldn't have mattered anyway because
I was gonna say,
protesters vanished. Yes.
But there was a lot of quietness when it came down to the natural resources
Oh.
that came along with the Crimea.
Yes. But now take, though, even more important for us psychologically would be Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania. And Poland. I mean, Poland, lock, stock, and barrels, a member of NATO. I mean, the Polish Prime Minister has offered to build an army base and call it Fort Trump. Which, I mean, shows you that they've all in. And unlike the French or the English or the Germans, these people are on the front lines. And the Estonians, Latvians, Lithuanians experience Russian, terror and pogroms and whatever over the years. Because I don't think there's any country in the world, in Eastern Europe, that matched we could talk about Hitler, but when we talk about Russia's resettlement problems and the way they did things, it's utterly
Stalin
amazing.
had his hand
Yes,
pretty
yes.
heavy in.
Yes, yeah.
When you start thinking about how many people got sent on all expense paid vacations to Novosibirsk.
The lovely, yeah.
Well, I mean, the third biggest city in Russia right now.
Yeah.
Let's see, how did that get started?
So that's one of the main reasons why it's important to make sure that NATO stays around, that we don't dissolve NATO. And another reason why other NATO members should live up to their obligations, because Russia is a real threat in that region. Russia is a threat to us, but we're on the other side. We're the smallest target, the hardest target. If Russia's going to go after anybody, it's going to be those soft targets.
Amazing. I think that's why that whole thing about the Saudi Arabian journalist there, Khashoggi, and the link with Turkey and all the mechanisms there that were going on, because it was hard to see the Turks as champions of civil rights. I mean, that the man went into a legation in Turkey, Saudi Arabian legation in Turkey, and not say the United States, shows you that there was a fatal misjudgment, let's put it that way. But of course, all the things that came out of it, we really wonder what the truth of it all was, So.
And there's still a lot of people who say, why is it that we're taking on the Saudis by ourselves?
Yeah.
Well, it seems like we do it everywhere, and it's one of the things that sometimes I get upset with my own party with, is that it seems like we're always, every national crisis or international crisis there is, it's always the U.S. taking the lead, whether it's Afghanistan, Iraq, Syria.
But wait a minute, you got the French morally supporting us, saying, go in and boycott Iran. We'll send in our businessmen.
Well, they'll send in 100 soldiers and say they
Well,
help.
but they'll send in our businnesmen to cut deals.
It's pretty,
so it's good for their economy.
It's pretty clear the most dangerous country in the Middle East is Iran. Their death squads, their secret police, their whatever. I mean, between the Saudis and the Israelis, which is a strange alliance, it isn't an alliance, but a strange pudding is, the Iranians came in and basically manipulated Lebanon. They've done the same with Syria, with Assad. They've been masterminds. The Iraqis are not as powerful as they were, but the Iranians, they almost operate with impunity.
When you say the Saudis and Israelis are strange bedfellows, I don't see it. The Saudis have always operated under one major premise. We don't want anything to change. We like our country. We like how we run our country.
We maintain the holy shrines. We want to keep them
we
safe.
do all this stuff because we have to, but at the end of the day, the royal family has a pretty good life.
That's a mind understatement,
Well, why would they want it changed? And if putting up with a little country annoys us, but we get to keep our life,
well,
why would we want to risk that?
The two intelligence services, though, and others are with the United States are allied against the Iranians. I mean, this is all behind the scenes, but this is the fact of life.
We saw somebody get arrested in Dhahran, eastern Saudi, where the oil provinces are, because he published a cartoon that said, extra, extra. It was a newspaper, parody of a newspaper, where it said, Saudi Arabia declares war on Iran. North Korea gets the contract. You know, and it really brought home when you think about it, saying, okay.
What happened to him?
You know, I mean, who knows? He got retired into a nice home somewhere. But you think about it and you say, wait a minute, why would they go after Iran? Because Iran is trying to change life in the kingdom.
Well,
Yeah, they're struggling to make it, you know, they want to be the regional
And how are they
power.
going after Iran? Well, they'd give a contract to somebody, because they're certainly not going to
They're not doing it
sacrifice.
themselves.
Oh,
well, that's that tragedy of when I know I watch the Rick Steves travel shows a lot because they're amazing on Channel 2. But when you talk to the Iranian people, they're remarkably, I use the word enlightened, and I'm not saying that in a superior way, but they're very urbane, very sophisticated, and not really Arab in the sense of
well, they're Persian.
yes. But they're saddled with a government that's like a strange sort of throwback, like the Saudis, to a sort of a medieval sort of system. And you hear, but I think the pressure there, and I mean, you wonder the poor souls there who've gone to the streets and got killed and whatever, and worse, I'm sure, in the torture camps they've got them in. You know, it's just a strange thing that some governments can have that total control over people like that.
But just to loop back to the media and how unfriendly they are to Trump, and on the Syria crisis,
Yeah.
you know, they were so critical of him when he decided he was going to take the restraints off our U.S. military and go after ISIS.
Yes.
That Trump was going to lead us into a third war that, you know, we haven't finished, Afghanistan and Iraq. And now that he's
Oh, and now he's getting crucified for trying to get out.
and now he's getting crucified. Exactly. So you can't win with the Democrats and this media.
No.
Anything he does, they're
took-
against.
and I
he
mean-
could literally create world peace, and they'd be
let's take
against
Walk
a
on
it.
step
water.
back
Walk
and
on
look at our
water.
friends in North Korea.
Yeah.
Previous administrations, Republican and Democrats, always offered them stuff. They agreed
Yeah.
to do things, and at the end they said, nah,
Yeah.
We've
but
got-
we'll keep the grain, we'll keep the...
Yeah. You can't return the grain, so.
Wait a minute, now, Trump's getting hammered because they're not really eliminating their nukes.
What's new? Yeah.
But wasn't he the one that said, I'm giving up nothing?
Yeah.
You show me yours first.
Yeah.
So I don't understand how he's doing worse.
Yeah. To Mike's point, under Obama, when we're fighting ISIS, we had rules of engagement. They had to call lawyers in the Pentagon or lawyers on the thing. Say, can we do this? Can we do that? Do we have to tell them before we do
Is
this?
that shades of Vietnam?
Okay, so Trump takes that out. We basically demolish a lot of ISIS because of the
99% destroyed.
And no credit for Trump. He used the brilliance of our own military commanders and the Kurds and the other people who are fighting to win.
We spend $750 billion to have the best military force in the world. Now, I agree that you have to have civilian oversight. But in my mind,
Not on the battlefield.
Congress and the executive branch decides when we go in.
And then,
And then, okay, I spent $700 billion. You better know what the hell you're doing. This is what I want you to do. Go.
but it's literally like, since they use drones, it was like literally talking to a Defense Department or a Department of Justice, and we know what that department's like, given what we've seen with the Russian investigation. Permission to kill or not kill this person from thousands of miles away. Sorry, these are military decisions. But
You know, for 4 years, the past administration fought ISIS, and
Yeah.
they may have pushed or stopped the advance of ISIS. And in 2 years, the Trump administration completely destroyed it.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's the difference in management style where
Yeah.
you know, Obama really wanted, you know, his image to be intact of being a peacekeeper, you know, a Nobel Peace Prize winner and all that. But Trump was basically, look, I have generals in place. This is a military decision.
But
I'm
you
letting them do what they
If
need
it
to
was
do.
your son or daughter on the front lines, you know, do I want some bureaucrat in Washington deciding, well, yeah, we're going to lose little Eddie or little Mike, but it's for the greater
well,
good.
how do we ever know what really happened in Benghazi? That's another question, which always we'll never get an answer to that. what happened was pretty horrifying to the victims and to others, but we'll really never know the true answer as to how it devolved or whatever. But I mean, we have a military that's superbly trained, led by good people. And the thing that I look at today is the lady who ran for Senate from Arizona, a combat pilot. When you think of today, the greatness of the country, it's from the mix of the people in it. You have people who are sons of immigrants who rise up and do whatever. And you have the incredible pictures of women in the military. And it's an incredible talent we have because the way the country is. And one of our great strengths is that mixture of people in the country, I think. I mean, and it's so obvious
Ed,
to us.
Think about it.
Yeah.
You know, your comment of sons or daughters of immigrants.
Yeah.
Well, unless your name is Squanto or, you know, whatever Native American, everybody is a son or a daughter of an immigrant sometime.
We do, in the brief time we do have to bring up Liz Warren's DNA test, which has to rank as the most dumb blank move that I've ever seen in politics because
Even the Democrats were criticizing
we
her.
were at a party and a man said, I did a DNA test and he is basically Scottish and English, but he figured out that he had 6% sub-Saharan African blood from like Nigeria, Benin, all the way over. Like people have admixtures. So I said, so let me get this right. You have more African blood than Liz Warren has Indian blood, and the guy started. And we all started laughing.
The only thing I'm having a hard time with is when people are saying you can't say she's unlikable just because she's a woman. I agree.
Yeah.
I just don't like her.
What about Hillary?
Hillary was the same way. It could have been a man.
Yeah.
Right? I don't really care. You know, well, the country's not ready for a woman leader.
By the way,
you know, wait a minute. Time out.
Yeah. Yeah.
2 of the last 3 CEOs I worked for are
Yes.
women.
Yes.
And you know something? I didn't care about their gender.
Condoleezza Rice could have been a
Condi would have been incredible to follow.
And by the way,
Nikki Haley would be great.
Nikki Haley, and by the way, is on the Democratic side. I don't have any issue with Michelle Obama's likability. I don't really know much about her. I'm sure we have many different
As
views.
a person, she seems
No, but
great.
I'm just saying.
As a commander-in-chief, I don't know.
Well, no, what I'm just saying about.
You know, so but it's
I'm
not
talking about likability.
It just annoys me when immediately I can't not like you, or they say you're anti-Portuguese.
Yes, but
Right? No, I just don't like you.
Yes, but isn't it convenient when you had a Hollywood entertainer talk about the border wall was like what the Nazis did? Well, you know, you can't buy stupid. You can't rent stupid. You can't do anything. But when people don't know your own history, you know, when they don't even know the history of the people of the world, who I was unfortunately lucky enough to see the Berlin Wall when it was up. And the thing that was amazing to me was, and the Germans are very different people. I don't see much in there as far as sympathy. But when you saw the crosses that were put up from the people who got shot leaving East Berlin,
When you
it's amazing.
left Checkpoint Charlie,
Yep.
because when the KAL flight was
Yep.
shut down, I was in Moscow, and they shut down all the flights. So we had to fly to Schoenfeld and then
Berlin,
take the
yeah.
bus. And as you're going through, and you're realizing that whole space is full of live anti-personnel mines. And the people up in the towers, they're not there to protect their own citizens.
They killed them in a minute because they're going to get a reward. Yeah.
You know, I
And
mean,
the
it
dogs.
was
And the dogs.
scary.
And the
It
dogs.
was absolutely
Yeah.
the most frightening moment
Yeah.
that this old boy's had.
Yeah.
Is saying, "Oh my God,
Yeah.
look what we're driving through," and there was just a sense of relief when we hit the other side.
Yeah. They had the Russians' way of reminding the Germans in the Soviet sector was to leave many buildings with the World War II marks on them to remind the Germans who won. Now, West Berlin had already started the Renaissance, and of course nothing like when it became the capital of the country, but it was vibrant and whatever. And you had this other side where the lights were out and whatever, and you'd see the guard towers, and you hear the dogs, and you're going,
I
whoops.
felt so sorry for the people from the DDR, because the people along the border,
That's the East German.
East Germany, they could pick up Western television. And
So
you
we
know,
could
as much
see
as they
everything.
said that this idea of a supermarket
Yeah.
is just Western propaganda, a lot of them knew.
Well, there's a friend in Milford whose family came from, he had come over as a refugee at the end of World War II. His father was a Union official, anti-Nazi, and they did a good job of having him and working a shipyard, working to death. But his family and them were allowed to come over because they were victims. But a relative came here and went up to Shaw's, or whatever the name of it was, and went in the, got to Boston, came in when the store was crying because she'd never seen anything like that in her life.
But you know,
Yeah,
you
yeah.
turn around and
Yeah.
say, is it immoral for us to not open our doors to all of Venezuela? You got people starving down there.
Well, how
Couldn't
many
we
people-
take in 10 or 20
How many
million?
people, that poll they did, how many percentage of the population of the world, and it was an amazing percentage, would want to live here? So we realized that's not manageable.
Right.
But-
Wait a minute, most of Sub-Saharan
know what I'm saying.
Africa.
Unless every country that wants to come into this country surrenders their government to us to
Yeah.
become part of our country,
Yeah.
we can't cover it all.
It's almost
We
like the,
can't-
But
almost
even
like
if
the
they
Roman
did,
Empire.
how could you take care of the world?
Well,
You can't. You can't. You can't be everywhere.
It's like the Roman Empire. You swore allegiance to the emperor. You said the emperor was God, whether you believed it or not, and you paid your taxes. And you got counted in the census, just like Jesus and his family did, or whatever. You're a citizen of the Roman Empire. That was how Rome's great success. They
Yeah,
didn't
but
ask for too
everything
much else.
flowed to Rome.
Yeah, but they didn't ask for too much else, though.
I
That's
mean,
what I'm
if
saying.
you complained,
Well, hey.
you know, I mean, you didn't complain for long.
No, but again, there was a lot less control of the world and whatever. Yeah, but again, so the challenge is, I mean, the president's talking tonight. Will obviously be dated by the end of the evening, but we'll see what comes of it. I mean,
Do you think he can get away with building a wall under emergency?
well, I don't know I don't know.
I don't think he
That
might
might be his
attempt
end
that,
game.
but I don't think it would pass.
I don't think that's
court
his end
challenge.
No, because
I think he's
you
better
could-
off just
you
keeping the
could-
government shut down until they budge.
you could bring all the military in, you could do everything, but you can't go taking the land in Texas.
No, but a smart
under
wall,
emergency
smart wall is very different. They can prioritize the areas where people come in and make it pretty simple.
No.
So,
Thank you.
Yep, thank you.
And as always, to our 6 loyal viewers, thank you for letting us remember a very special old friend.
Yep.
Thank you for watching, and may tomorrow be a better night than tonight. God bless. Good night.
And also, we have a minute? Yeah, is it campaign season? If there's anyone out there in Milford who wants to run for office, we need people to run for office in town. For any office.
We'll have a show before
Yes.
and talk about local politics.
Yep.
Awesome.
Yep.
Good night, all.
Far too long since I've been home.